So as I was listening to my clients, again, from a systems perspective, I did try to map out the distinctions and the sequences. And the big distinction that leaped out immediately was between parts that ordinarily you would love because they're these inner children who give you all kinds of joy and playfulness and creativity, and when they're not hurt. But when they get hurt or terrified or shamed, they're the most sensitive parts. Or when you get that, when that happens to you in your life, they're the parts that take on those super burdens of worthlessness and terror and emotional pain. And then they have the power to overwhelm you with that if they ever get triggered, and they can make it so you can't function or you won't get out of bed for a week. So most of us have an impulse to lock them away and just move on and don't think about where they're stuck in the past and let it all go, which is what our culture tends to do. And everybody in our culture tells us to do with trauma. And so we wind up exiling our most precious parts simply because they got hurt or scared or shamed. And when you have a lot of exiles, you feel more delicate, the world seems more dangerous, so many things could trigger them. So other parts are forced out of their naturally valuable states to become protectors. And some of them protect the exiles from the world by managing the world, by managing your relationships, managing your appearance, managing your performance. Often they become critical, these critics, because they're just don't know what to do but yell at you to get you to behave so that you don't get hurt or anything. So there's a lot of different common manager roles, but they all have in common some desire to preempt anything that might upset your exiles. World has a way of doing that anyway. And when it happens, when an exile gets triggered, it's a big emergency because these flames of raw emotion come exploding out and threaten to consume you. And so there's another set of parts who stand by and go into action immediately whenever any of those feelings start to get too big, in a way to try and either distract you from them or douse them with some substance or get you higher than the flames until they burn themselves out. And so those we call firefighter protectors, in contrast to the manager protectors I described earlier. So that became the map, which has held up really well over these 40 years. And again, just to reiterate, these roles are not the parts, they're the roles the part was forced into. Once released from those roles, you can't even predict how the part's going to be, but it's going to return to its naturally valuable state.
Brilliant. And I just want to sort of go over a couple of things here. So with the managers, their role is to prevent exiles being triggered. And then firefighters, whenever they are triggered, it's to put out the flames and sort of soothe the pain almost, you know?
Exactly right.
Something that really jumped out at me there was basically the more trauma somebody has experienced, particularly at a young age, the more exiles they're going to be carrying. And because they've got more exiles, they need more protector parts just to function in life. So people that are highly managerial, highly perfectionistic, etc., they've probably experienced a lot of trauma, and that is maybe explains a lot of behavior.
That's what I find. Yeah, people with those big manager diagnoses like OCD or even Tourette's or depression, really covering up a lot of trauma.
The way my own definition of what an addictive process is to me is the process, an internalized process of managers trying to get it right and look right and be right in their drive, and in battle with firefighters who say, I have to get the edge off, I have to feel better, I have to get out, I have to escape. I need soothing, that self-medication and the drive to And both of them are driven, and the more to protect the system, the person, from any kind of too much vulnerability flooding their system. If someone's been raised in a neglectful or exploitative situation, or just has attachment wounds, they lost a dad, they don't get along with their siblings, there's been a lot of pain and messed up relationships. We all have a certain amount of pain. Some people have been exposed to so much more emotional pain than others. Either way, our managers and firefighters are trying to protect us, and managers try to protect us by doing the right thing, and firefighters protect us by having some escape or some soothing. And that conflict between, do I soothe or do I do it right, or do I work or do I play, do I indulge myself or do I and reward myself, or do I work harder? Those central polarizations get very extreme because they're each driven to relieve burdens that in these young parts are carrying beliefs about themselves, that I'm bad, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable. If they really knew me, So when we're holding those beliefs about ourselves, we develop these protective parts, and those are the ones we send out in the world for people to look at, so that we don't look too vulnerable.
There are parts that a lot of the parts are what they call protectors. And all that means is that let's say they arose within your personality at different stages of your life when things were rough, and they try to help you in different ways. Some of those parts they call managers, because they're very kind of business-like, future-oriented. You better not do this, you better not do that, you better, follow the rules, you better watch what you say and watch what you do, very much like a manager. Okay, that's one kind of self, shall we say, protection. And you can find those parts and you can talk to them, and they certainly talk to you. And then the other class of protectors they call firefighters, which is a funny kind of a term, but they call it that because these parts are extremely impulsive. And it's like they want to put out the fire and they don't care about making a mess. So that's where the name came from. It's like, you imagine the fire brigade comes out and sprays down the place and breaks it all up and puts out the fire, then they leave, right? And they don't give a shit about leaving a mess. Well, in addiction, it's pretty obvious that the impulsive part has that kind of psychology, so to speak. It cares. The fire that it's putting out is negative emotion. It's normally anxiety. That's the fire. That's what you want to put out with drugs or drink or whatever it is. And this impulsive part says, yeah, let's do it. Let's get high. Come on, let's say time. We know this is going to work. Let's just do it. Get rid of the anxiety right now. Come on. And you do it. And it's like, oh shit, now what? That's the next morning and you're 3 hours late for work or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, you kind of fucked me up here. And so the idea that these parts do have some kind of psychological independence, that they actually have little personalities of their own, starts to come into focus. And it's quite fascinating. I mean, I've now gone through this kind of therapy myself, so I know what it's like on both ends. And it's powerful stuff. Like you find a set of like wishes or ways of doing things or agendas that have a very distinct character to them. Like when I used to do drugs, it was very clear that I was taking huge risks, huge chances, and really kind of almost wrecking my chances for any kind of future. And it didn't matter to me. It wasn't in my awareness at all, that aspect. So could really see how, so that's all. That's basically it. Those are the two kinds of parts. And then, of course, in addiction, one of the big problems, and IFS covers this beautifully as well, is that you go out and you drink too much or you get high or you do whatever you do. And then the manager comes out and says, you jerk, you creep, you idiot, you did it again. How could you? And there's a lot of internal anger and blame and shame and all that stuff, which raises the anxiety. In fact, that becomes the main source of anxiety. And so you get a feedback cycle. There's more anxiety. And the more you sort of feel the anxiety, the more you feel like doing it. And the more you feel like doing it, the more anxiety there is. And then you really feel like doing it, and then you do it. So it's a very neat psychological system. I was going to say metaphor, but I don't even think it's a metaphor. I think it's really just the way things work for understanding addiction and treating it.
If you're interested in seeing the full session and 34 others like it, you might want to check out the Holistic Recovery Summit. This is a revolutionary free online conference which brings together 35 world-leading clinical psychologists, researchers, and practitioners who will share with you their best practices for mind, body, social, and spiritual approaches to addiction treatment, enabling you to be at the forefront of evidence-based care. With a lineup including Stephen Porges, Janina Fisher, Ian McGilchrist, Pat Ogden, Anna Lemke, Stephen Hayes, Richard Schwartz, and 28 others, this really is a once-in-a-lifetime learning opportunity. The best bit is it's 100% free to attend live, and you can do so from the comfort of home. You'll also be able to upgrade to your recordings and certification pass after registration, although this is entirely optional. For more information, please check out the sign-up link in the description.